I guess we should start with the Jake Muzzin LTIR injury suffered against the Montreal Canadiens in a pretty unfortunate accident. I think he ran into Chris Weidman, if I remember correctly. But now he is on long-term injured reserve. I guess before we get to the whole before we get to salary cap issues and what that can mean for the team there, just a note on Jake Muzzin, if you can. Like, this is not the first time he's had to deal with some major injury since he's joined the Leafs.
Yeah, he's had a really difficult season. And that's after two playoffs, the last two Leafs playoffs, he got injured during the series. Montreal was game 6. He had a groin injury, and then he had an unfortunate incident in the bubble with Columbus. So, it's been a couple tough years in a sense for Jake Muzzin, because obviously you get to his stage of his career, the reason and the importance he carries with the Leafs, it's in those moments you want him to be there for. And here we are again with some uncertainty. And, if there's maybe some positive, if you're looking for the little bit of sliver here, is that he's not a player who's actually had concussion trouble throughout his career. He doesn't have a long history of diagnosed concussions or head traumas among, the injuries he had suffered. But the downside is that he had one in January, and that took him quite a while to recover from. And now he's got another one that he's recovering from in February. And, there's pretty much an acceptance, from Jake, his agents, the team. I think everyone's on the same page that it's going to be a fairly long layoff, just to get a sense of it, because he did have, some pretty significant symptoms the last time around. And I think caution is the name of the game. And as you say, it's a total fluke play. He loses an edge, slams into Chris Weidman. There's no fault to be assessed. There's almost like not too much thinking to be had about it, other than it's just unfortunate how it happened. And, it creates now this dynamic heading into the trade deadline that wouldn't have been there, because he's already been placed on long-term injured reserve. But the Leafs can really only use that cap space with deadline acquisitions if he's gone for the rest of the regular season. And, we're only a couple days since this incident happened. And at this point, no one knows for sure. And so there's going to be a ton of talk about that. A lot of closely studying the Leafs roster moves for hints about how they feel about it. And then, obviously we hope the best for Jake and his recovery as well.
Absolutely. I was reading a piece from our buddy James Myrtle earlier this morning, essentially kind of just wondering what the Leafs could do if with Jake Muzzin on LTIR ahead of the trade deadline. And you can correct me if I have it wrong here, but I think with the fact that Rasmus Sandin was demoted and they called up 2 other players, it'll kind of help build up some salary space. And with Jake Muzzin on LTIR, the Leafs could essentially put themselves in a situation where they could exceed the cap by a little over $5.6 million. That's me trying to use my brain.
Yeah. Well, I'll say it as simple as possible for those that aren't well-versed in the CBA. Essentially, before you place the player on LTIR, you can go over the cap by his cap hit, but any amount you have left under the ceiling when you do it, that eats into it. And so what the Leafs did, and this does sort of signal that they're maximizing their space there, is they called up Christian Rumens and Brendan Mennel, who I don't believe are roster options for them. This is on an off day. They sent down Rasmus Sandin, and the balancing of the books in that got them, I believe, within about $20,000 of the cap ceiling. So then when they placed Jake Muzzin's $5.625 million contract on, it leaves them more than $5.6 million in room, give or take. And some of these numbers are a bit rough because, we lean on the good folks at Puckpedia and Cap Friendly for these numbers. But literally, if they had one player's roster designation off this season, the numbers would be a little bit, off, and the league doesn't publish those numbers. But within, for being general and very close to accurate, the Leafs have about $5.6 million that they could add today. But of course, if they went and traded for a $5 million player just for fun today, Jake Muzzin was ready to play before the regular season ends, they'd have to clear $5 million off the cap to make that happen. So, they'll have to be strategic in how they use this. I have a feeling they don't know for sure themselves. I mean, they put themselves in a position where they have that room, but they probably don't know yet just what Jake Muzzin's prognosis is going to be, how that all unfolds. But certainly by March 21st, which is the trade deadline, they're going to have a lot better idea of his recovery timeline and whether a trade can be made. And, the Leafs wanted to be active anyway. I think that they were in a position where they're considering maybe removing more assets as part of other trades to take on salary. And so this could end up, being some kind of blessing in disguise. You know, no one's cheering, of course, for an injury, but this is a sport where players routinely get injured. It's dangerous and physical. And so this could wind up allowing the Leafs to add another player and then hopefully be in a position to bring Jake Muzzin back in at some point before the big games of the playoffs. But again, it's a little too premature to say 100% that's what's going to happen. I just think it's definitely a possibility or an avenue that the Leafs might be going down.
Because, I mean, the Leafs could just pull a Tampa and just not play Jake Muzzin until the playoffs. I mean, the Vegas Golden Knights are doing that with Mark Stone, it looks like. I mean, why not do the same thing?
I think so, but I think there's some subtle differences, right? Like Mark Stone's, they've been managing that back injury throughout the year. They knew they had to activate Jack Eichel. You know, I'm not saying it's conspiracy theory, but I think that there was some time maybe to plan for that. That's all. I mean, look this is within the rules, man. Like Mark Stone has legitimate back injury. Like that's not a question. I think the only thing the league might look at closely with that is how long does he need to be out? What's the treatment plan? Like, are you using this as an advantage? But to this point, they haven't done anything wrong. Like long-term injured reserve exists. Half the league is in it. Half the league is exceeding the cap or pretty close to half because of it. I mean, this happens every season. I think what we've seen some teams do is be strategic. I don't think there's anything strategic about a concussion. You know, like that, the freak play that wasn't planned. There's no, as much as sometimes, you know, we like talking about the way the Leafs manage their cap. You know, Brandon Pridham gets a lot of shout outs, you know, in charge of managing the Leafs cap for being kind of a wizard. You know, I saw Mike Stevens say he wishes he could do his taxes. He'd have the Canadian government thing. You know,
in Pridham, we trust.
There is a lot of fun with that. And look, he's done a lot of crazy stuff over the years because the Leafs have been dancing the cap dance for a long time. This is actually different in my view because it's a concussion. And, you know, I've talked to people on both sides. I've got no indication. I don't think they're like, okay, he's done for the regular season. It's not like that. But look, let's see how he recovers. Let's see what happens. I think the Leafs will still potentially make moves where they're taking salary off the roster to bring salary in. But if it gets to March 21st and Jake Muzzin doesn't look like there's any hope of him playing before the end of April, well, then that's a whole lot more cap space for the Leafs to maybe be in on some of the bigger names than we would have guessed.
Before we get into the whole, you know, the Leafs idea of maybe clearing out more salary, are you a sucker for a good conspiracy theory? I know you mentioned the term conspiracy theory in your last answer.
Well, I don't mind one, you know, depends on the subject matter.
You know what? I'm just going to leave it there before we start getting way too crazy.
Your drink. I'll get a little coffee here. Get a little shot.